Matt Scratch here, and today I just wanted to talk to you about Mig Welder basics and got some tips here for you for maintaining your Mig Welder and keeping it healthy and happy. Um, there's two kinds of MIG welders that are commonly available to the homeowner, and the most common kind is going to be the flux core kind, and that might work fine if you're just doing like lawn furniture repairs or making some home projects that are not structurally vital. Please don't build like a utility trailer using a flux core, like a low amperage. There are professional grade flux core welders, but that's kind of different than what you get at the hardware store, like a 100 amp flux core welder. That's not capable of heavy duty projects like building a trailer or anything like that that is going to have a load on it, or people's lives are going to depend on it. So don't do that. Buy a gas welder at that point. And a lot of the flux core ones will run on gas as well, and they come with the regulator. This isn't the regulator that came with mine. Mine did come with the regulator. It was a rather cheap one, and I ended up bumping it and breaking it. They are pretty fragile, so you don't want to bump them. And so I bought this upgraded one from Air Liquide. That's how you say that. It's a French word, Air Liquide in Canada here. And anyways, I paid about $150 for it, so it's quite an upgrade from the one that came with this, and works really good. And to set it, you should probably consult your manufacturer of your regulator. Make sure you're setting it according to their specs. It's normally variants, like this one's 15 to 30 CFH, and it kind of depends what the thickness of the material is and how clean the material is, where you'd want to set that. You kind of want to fiddle with it, make sure that you're not getting any bubbling in your weld. That would mean that you're not having enough shielding gas there, and you have some contaminants bubbling out, so you'd want to turn it up at that point. So yeah, I don't have a welding cart yet, as you may notice, so I just boxed in this milk crate. Works pretty good to hold that stable. And welding helmet, highly recommend the Lincoln Auto Tint here. I've had this one since 2008, and it hasn't let me down. And all I've ever had to do is replace the outer and the inner cover shield. And one other thing, one little tip here, I put some tape there, and that just helps seal the top of the helmet to my skull cap a little better, and that it sort of helps the sparks from going down over the top of your head and down your face, which is a scary experience. So do whatever you can to protect the one set of eyes that you're given. Another thing, always keep a fire extinguisher handy, because fires can break out suddenly, and if you've got your dark welding helmet on, you're not going to necessarily notice the fire happening, and it might be out of control by the time you lift it. So you want to have that really close by. Always, follow the welder with the fire extinguisher, so you always have one. Another thing you're going to have to regularly do is clean out this tip. It gets splatter in there, and what happens is there's actually an insulating core there that so that when you ground out the outer piece to a piece of metal, it's not grounding out this part of it, because that would ground out the machine and cause your welder to sputter. And so what happens is this splatter in here, if you don't clean it out, it will build up. It will cover that on the other side here, and it'll start to arc across there and cause your welder to sputter. So you want to get in there with, like, needle nose pliers work good, flat blade screwdriver, low pick, whatever. They make pliers specially for it if you feel inclined to buy them, and you keep that clean. You also want to change that tip. That's called a contact tip, and I change it about 3 or 4 times every spool of wire, maybe even more. They're not worth a lot. I keep a bag full on the side of my welder here, so I have them at all times, and they come in different sizes according to what wire size you're using. I use a 023 diameter wire mostly, because I'm doing a lot of auto body work, so it works good for that. Another thing on these Lincoln welders, one tip I'll give you is you can remove these end rings off your trigger. They twist and slide, I believe, or some such thing. And then you can split your trigger if you're having problems with your trigger not working. That's the one problem I've had with this welder. And then there's contacts in there you can clean. Other than that, don't kink this, and you shouldn't have a problem. But if you kink it, your wire might start jamming in it, and you might have to find yourself replacing the core of this. I think the core is replaceable on most of these. Your ground clamp, this one looks goofy because I always do a little practice weld on it just to get the gas flowing through and everything, and kind of listen to how stable my arc is. But other than that, I replace it once in a while, so not a big deal. They're cheap. Keep that clean, that surface there clean that contacts your metal that you're grounding to, and equally keep your metal that you're grounding to clean. Use a heavy power cord to power your welder. If you've got a 140 amp welder like me, it requires a minimum of a 20 amp breaker, and a 20 amp breaker requires a 12 gauge cord. So make sure you use a 12 gauge cord on your welder, and unless you've got a bigger welder, and then it's probably 220 powered. So make sure you're using an appropriately large cord, and don't run a big welder on a small breaker. It'll bog down the welder. Even on the lower settings, it's not going to weld good. Like 15 amp breakers just don't cut it. You're going to have to upgrade and get a 20 amp breaker if you want quality welds. Keep your welder clean. I keep a sheet over mine when I'm not using it. Keeps the dust out of it. Especially in here, you've got all your drive mechanisms, and when they get dirty, they don't function well. You can set your tension on this spool, and you want to set it so it almost freewheels, but when you let go, it stops pretty instantly. Because if you set the tension too tight, then it's going to put strain on this, and it's going to slip there, and it's going to put strain on your drive motor, and that's not good. This, have it tight enough that it's never slipping, but don't have it so tight that it's putting extra strain on parts in there. That's bad. These rollers, they come in different sizes, so make sure you've got the appropriate size for your wire that you're using to prevent slippage. This right here is where you would change the polarity if you were using this machine. Is capable of running flux core wires, so this is where I would change the polarity to do that. Here are my contact tips. I keep them in there so they're nice and handy, and I blow this out with an air gun regularly. Keep it clean. There's your instructions from the manufacturer on how to set it. I have never looked at them. And one other thing is duty cycle. Every machine has a duty cycle, so you want to find out what yours is. This is a 20-minute duty, or a 20% duty cycle on this machine. So that would mean if you're running it for 10 minutes, you'd only want to weld on the full power setting for 2 minutes out of those 10 minutes. And that brings me to my next point, which is the cooling fan. When you're done welding, especially if you're welding like heavy plate or something, let your welder run for a few minutes after, just to cool it down, to keep that fan running. Some of the fancy ones, I think they have a thermostatically controlled fan that will run if it needs to after the welder's been shut off. But on these cheaper ones, that's really important. Let it run for a good couple minutes after you're done welding, and just make sure it's fully cooled down. And like I say, it's a good idea to throw an old blanket over it, keep the dust out of it. Take a blowgun, blow it out once in a while. All that stuff will just keep it happy and healthy for a longer period of time. And the result will be nice welds. So I'm going to do some more welding videos in the future here on joint setup, on sheet metal patches without warping the sheet, things like that. So stay tuned if you're into that kind of thing.